You may be surprised that I consider Defending Your Life an overlooked film, but think about it. When's the last time you saw it? Coming out in 1991, it made a mere $16 million. Even then, that wasn't very good. From the genius comedic mind of Albert Brooks, Defending Your Life is what I would term as cynically optimistic. It shows the afterlife is efficient, bureaucratic, and banal. And yet, the heart of what all this banality is pushing towards is self-improvement, which is kinda nice. After a quick look at Daniel's life, played by Albert Brooks, as a successful but alone yuppie on his birthday, he picks up a new BMW convertible, which turns out to be missing that lane departure warning due to the fact that it's 1991.
Come to me.
Now dead, he ends up on a tram and deposited in a hotel. He's pretty messed up and has no ability to speak. He sleeps in the hotel with very little questions about the whole thing, not that he could ask him if he wanted to. The next day, he gets a call, feels refreshed, and finds out he's in Judgment City, awakened by his lawyer who tells him he's here to defend his life. Also, he can eat whatever he wants. The eating thing is apparently a big deal when you no longer have a body. I don't know why. Judgment City is kind of a resort town with all you could ever want. Every food is sensational. Even the cheese omelet. He dresses in a tupa, which appears to be what everyone recently deceased wears. Before he can enjoy his first meal, he's whisked away on the red tram. They're really big on trams here. And deposited at his lawyer's office. You know, it's pretty hilarious how he kind of just accepts what's happening. Finally, he gets some answers from Bob Diamond, who's played by Rip Torn. The point of the whole thing is to improve, to grow, to get smarter. See, apparently we only use 3% of our brain, while Bob uses 48%. And the only way to get to that point is to move on. And to move on, you have to get over your fears.
So I'm on trial for being afraid.
Well, first of all, I don't like to call it a trial. Second of all, yes.
You keep going back to Earth until you get it right. So they'll look over 9 days of his life over the course of 4 days, during which the judges will have to decide whether or not he needs to go back to Earth or move forward. It's not really clear on what moving forward means, but no one seems to want to go back to Earth. Daniel is a worrier. He's constantly asking whether or not his trial is normal. Is 9 days enough? Is that too many? Turns out he's been back to Earth 20 times. Is 20 times, is that a lot? Is that too many? He's very worried about what's normal. But he's also curious. He's willing to try things, even if it doesn't really go very well.
Oh my God.
He's at least willing to ask the questions. He's not too afraid to find out these things. So that night, he goes to a comedy club and runs into Julia, played by Meryl Streep. She thinks he looks kind of familiar.
Perfect. Have you heard any new little brain jokes lately? Well, they're all around.
Hi.
I know you, right?
I hope so. Who are you?
Two.
I'm Julia.
Oh, hi. I'm Daniel.
Hi.
You know me?
You like these?
Well, I thought I did.
Maybe because I'm the only man in here under 100.
Yeah, that's probably what it is. The comedy club turns out to be a dud, so they take a walk and get to know each other. And they really hit it off. Julia's charming. She seems to be taken with Daniel. They commiserate on their love of eating all they want and realize that they feel okay about being dead. Not happy per se, but just not traumatized by it. She had kids, she misses them, one was adopted, and she seems to be very chipper about things. They think it's the way it might be here in Judgment City, so you accept what is and can deal with your trial the best way possible. There's also a lot of talk about how everyone's brains and how they're big and how no one can stop talking about it. Daniel finds Julia is getting a better deal than he is. She seems to be getting a lot of perks and has dinner party with her defender. She has a better hotel and various different things. She definitely has it all together, and he's quite taken with her as well. The next day, he gets his first day of his trial, which they keep insisting is not a trial. The prosecutor says that he's clearly a quality human, but he's still held back by fear. They start out by showing a bullying incident from his childhood. He weakly, and with the help of his defender, claims he was showing restraint. He also helps his case by giving his friend paint supplies when his friend needs it, even though he got in trouble. It makes a better case, until they followed up with showing that he turned on his friend when a bigger punishment was forthcoming.
I didn't do it! Steve did it! It was Steve's fault!
What are you saying to me?
This trial is not going well. That night, he ends up at a Japanese steakhouse, has some tuna, and meets a guy named Frank who has 15 days for his trial. He's like the anti-Julia, so you feel like, well, maybe Daniel isn't so bad. Julia does leave him a message, tells him to meet her tomorrow at the front entrance after the trial. The next day, Diamond can't make it and he gets a substitute defender. It's okay, he uses 51% of his brain. He does nothing during the trial and is fairly useless. This day, he's shown being given some interesting information on Casio, but he doesn't take the inside tip to buy the stock. And then the judges are shown a series of boneheaded decisions, and then finally, Daniel rehearsing with his wife that he's going to take $65,000, not a penny less, until he actually gets to the job interview, and immediately caves.
I cannot take the job for under 65 under no conditions.
Well, I'm prepared to offer you $49,000.
I'll take it.
Julia, on the other hand, is wowing the judges and her prosecutor. Daniel is drawn to her, but is starting to feel a little intimidated by her. They decide that day to take a trip to the Past Lives Pavilion, as hosted by, who else, Shirley MacLaine, in what's probably the funniest moment in the movie.
Please place your hand on the plate now.
Who are you?
I'm Prince Valiant. Who are you?
Dinner.
They continue to connect. He really enjoys her company and isn't certain how it could be so easy. His humor has her hooked and she's just generally good. They decide to have dinner the next day after the trial. They share a passionate kiss before they leave. The next day, Diamond returns and the trial begins. They show a time when Daniel couldn't speak in front of a pile of people and just failed, just too scared to speak. Fortunately, he was saved by the fire department evacuating everyone for a gas leak. He gets a reprieve when they show a day when he wrecked a snowmobile and had to walk 3 miles with a broken leg. Pretty brave. Of course, he never went on a snowmobile again. He makes his best showing so far. Julia isn't done yet, so he peeks in on her to see her day of saving everyone from a burning house, including her cat. Even the prosecutor is smitten. Needless to say, Daniel's inferiority complex is growing.
Very exciting stuff up there, really. It was like watching a Mutual of Omaha commercial.
You're just jealous.
You'll never know how much.
They go to a restaurant and they have a great time. Until his prosecutor happens to come into the restaurant and he freaks out. They leave when he can't take it that the prosecutor is there. At the hotel, Julia invites him up to her room. She feels that their relationship feels effortless, and he agrees. He wants to go up with her, but after the near panic attack, he's too concerned about this trial. He's pretty certain he's not going to the same place she is. She confesses she loves him. He adores her, but he doesn't say anything. She understands, and they part. The next day, his last scene is pretty good. He was divorced, and he had very little money. He and his wife were going to go to Hong Kong, but the divorce kind of made that not work out. He could have cashed in the ticket, but he decided to go to Hong Kong. Then when he found out that he was going to spend the entire flight in a center seat, he decided to spend extra money, $3,000, to go first class. With $9,000 left to his name, he spends $3,000 to go first class. Pretty good, not worrying about the future, just doing something that he wanted to do. But then the prosecutor shows her coup de grace. It was his speech to Julia last night. He's asked point blank, why didn't you go with her?
I was afraid.
A little louder.
I was afraid.
There's a weak defense on what it's like on Earth with sex and diseases, but it's all moot. It's all over. He's going back to Earth.
What does it say?
You're going back.
That night, they get into their respective trams to either move on or to head back to Earth. He spies Julia on her tram, and he decides to get off his tram, nearly getting run over, getting zapped by ethereal tram electricity. There's something I never thought I'd type. And desperately tries to get on her tram. He bangs on the door, he yells, he declares that he won't let her go, he loves her too much. He keeps banging and banging on the door, and we see he's being watched. The trial is still going. Diamond finally makes a good argument.
Wait for me! Wait for me!
Brave enough for you?
Open the door, please!
The judges reverse their decision, and the doors open, and they go to the great beyond together. I love this movie. I said it's an example of cynical optimism. The banality of the afterlife with trams and lawyers and hotels and restaurants, it's weird and it's ridiculous, but it's all in service of one important thing. Can we overcome fear?
Fear is like a giant fog. It sits on your brain and blocks everything. Real feelings, true happiness, real joy. They can't get through that fog. But you lift it, and buddy, you're in for the ride of your life.
Albert Brooks and Meryl Streep are charming and they have real chemistry together. Brooks, of course, is the master of neurotic comedy and he plays the balance well. You do believe he's holding himself back, but that he could be more. And that's a tough balance to achieve. So when he finally throws off all the excuses, all the fear, and just goes for it with Julie at the end, it really works. The main message is good too. Fear is a thing that's best in small doses, especially the way civilization is now. Let's face it, we have no real problems, and yet I see so much more fear than ever, even though we've never been safer than ever. Brooks wanted to do a film depicting a non-religious afterlife. He explained, self-examination got a bad rap with all the yuppies turning inward, and I think it's an important thing to do. I think he's right on that to a certain extent, but mostly it's about self-improvement. It was the first movie he ever did that had a lot of special effects. Many of those people worked on Total Recall the year before. While the effects were not extensive, there were some interesting moments. He got a lot of response over the years that people who were dying or had relatives who were dying said that the movie made them feel better. He posits it might be because it presented a possibility that wasn't all clouds and ghostly images. I really like the basic, straightforward message of overcoming obstacles, in this case fear. Of course, any real examination of the film does bring up some interesting questions. For instance, there are some real psychopaths that have no fear. Isn't there something more to moving on than just not being afraid? Don't get me wrong, I think overcoming fear is a big one, and it certainly holds a lot of people back. But we also need to look at being a positive force in the universe as well. For instance, these people whose selfie turned out to be the last moment of their life probably didn't have a lot of fear. Not a lot of brains either, and intelligence was a big thing in this movie.
The point of this whole thing is to keep getting smarter, to keep growing, to use as much of your brain as possible. For example, I use 48% of my brain.
I think they have mentioned something along the lines of overcoming weakness. It would have made more sense. For Daniel, it was fear, but maybe for someone else, it's pride. You know, a 7 deadly sins type of trial. Also, if you're going to keep going back to get better, but you don't remember anything from before, well, how are you supposed to improve? maybe overcomplicating this movie would be a disservice to its narrative. Truth is, I'm with Daniel throughout the movie. He's just likable enough to overlook a few of his flaws. And when he jumps off that tram, damn if I'm not all in at that point. And I really, really like the idea that after death, it's not over. You're still making choices, you can still overcome your fears, and you can still make a difference and change your life, even if the life is over. As I said at the beginning, I bet many of you might be familiar with this one, but I would have bet a lot more of you aren't. It's not exactly a classic, maybe a cult classic at this point. It was certainly overlooked at the box office at the time. Siskel and Ebert were mixed, with Ebert liking it a lot more than Siskel.
Defending Your Life gets a mixed review from me. I enjoyed the setup, the jokes about Judgment City, and much of his trial. But I thought the film fell down at the end in the relationship between Brooks and Streep.
I did like the ending, and I like what happened to the characters at the end. I thought this was a movie about how people can hope for redemption and moving up to a higher plane through the love of somebody who is more advanced than they are.
It's on HBO Max at the time of this recording, and I recommend you give it a shot. It's not long, the story is tight and well-focused, and has a great emotional payoff at the end. Hell, even the score is really good. If you like Albert Brooks, and you want to see Meryl Streep before she became insufferable, then I really recommend it.